So within 48 hours of starting a detox program, they can suffer 25% liver function loss. How can you recover from fatty liver? It's very easy.
Fatty liver is a common health condition that more people have than you might think. It happens when too much fat builds up in the liver, and it can make you feel tired and sick over time. Many people don't know they have it because there aren't always clear signs, and if left untreated, it can lead to more serious health complications. In this video, Barbara O'Neill will teach you the causes of fatty liver and her simple 48-hour plan she gives her health retreat guests to get rid of that liver fat and feel better. So stay tuned and discover how small changes can lead to big improvements in your well-being.
But part of healing the body is detoxification, because we all have been subject to environmental poisons at different times in our lives. And whenever an environmental poison comes into our body, the first place it goes is the liver. And the liver, I call the liver the project manager, because the liver is the one that deals with everything that comes in. So if an environmental poison comes in, it goes straight to the liver, as everything does. You see, on a job site, the project manager, he's orchestrating it. So if the plumbers come in, they go to the project manager. If the plasterers come in, they go to the project manager. So the project manager is orchestrating the job site. So we look at the job site being the human body. So environmental poisons come in, and the liver has a look at some of them and says, we can process that and eliminate it, but this one's nasty. We've got to wrap it up in fat and store it. And so this is often what happens when environmental poisons come in. They're locked up in the fat cells. It's almost like it's a little compartment that it's sort of holding it there so it's not going to poison us. We had a man attend our program who was a Vietnam veteran. And unfortunately, in the Vietnam War, it was probably the first time chemical warfare was used. So a lot of the veterans from the Vietnam War have a lot of poisons in their body. And this man was a little overweight, and he said to me, my doctor said, don't lose weight. So why did his doctor say that? Because as those fat stores get broken down, what are they going to release? They're going to start releasing those nasty environmental poisons. We're going to be looking at that process today. So everything that goes into the body first goes to the liver, and then the liver determines where it goes. We're going to now look at what happens with food. We're going to look at this in more detail tomorrow with diabetes. But carbohydrates have become a huge part of people's diet today. And I want to show you what they break down to, and I want to show you what the liver does with that as the project manager. So what would be your carbohydrates? Bread, that's a high carbohydrate. Cereal is another high carbohydrate. Pasta, yep. Yep. What you call French fries, we also call chips. So chips are like French fries, and chips are also the thin, crispy that you buy. Rice, that's right. And pizza, that's another one that's become popular. Yes, potatoes. And we could do a whole list, but we're just going to put cakes, etc. So cakes, etc. takes into consideration pretzels, biscuits, you call them cookies, we call them biscuits, croissants, donuts, this is the whole lot there. Rice is, yes, another carbohydrate, and sugar, that's a pure carbohydrate. In the gastrointestinal tract, these foods all break down to a singular structure called glucose. Now, while I'm talking about the liver, I'd like to stop for a moment and talk about fatty liver. Fatty liver has been quite common with usually alcoholics, and that's not a surprising because the huge amount of glucose they're taking. But when fruit breaks down, it breaks down in the liver, well, in the gastrointestinal tract to two singular structures, fructose and glucose. So fructose is a singular structure as glucose is. The fructose and the glucose go into the blood. I call M1, main highway, project manager, takes it from the portal veins straight to project manager. And it's in the liver that fructose is converted to glucose. And as glucose, then it's sent to the cell. So let's have another look at the cell. We've looked at the cell a few times. We'll be looking at quite a few times. You'll know it off by heart by the end of the week. And I'm sure when I first wrote this, you thought, what's she talking about? But you'll get it. So the glucose goes in and it goes through the 20-step pathway. We certainly looked at that when we were looking at cancer, and it gives us 2 units of energy. And the end result of that is the chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And this chemical form of glucose, pyruvate, gets fed into the 8-step pathway. We looked at how it's called the powerhouse of the cell because it gives us 36 units of energy. And what makes the difference is oxygen. This pathway, no oxygen. So that's how the energy cycle in the cell runs. So when glucose and fructose both go to the liver converts the fructose to glucose and then sends it to the cell to go through the energy pathways. But when someone's on a high carbohydrate diet, let's have a look at some of these. A lot of breads are sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. Many in the cake section are sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. And high fructose corn syrup is probably the cheapest form of sweetening. So it's put in a lot of the carbohydrate foods. So let's say someone's having for breakfast a orange juice. It's usually sweetened with sugar. Even if it says no added sugar, they are allowed to put sugar in it. What do I mean by that? On a good year, when the rains come at the right time and the oranges are sweet, they don't have to put any sugar in it. But on a bad year, when they don't get the rains at the right time, the oranges aren't as sweet. By law, they can add sugar to bring it up to the sweetness of the good year and say no added sugar. It's sort of just a trick in wording. They'll say, well, there's no added sugar after we got it to the sweetening of the good year. So even when it says no added sugar, it's like they do this trick in their wording. It's like margarine. It says polyunsaturated fat. It's actually a saturated fat. Otherwise, when you open the jar of margarine, it'll be liquid. And if you say, well, but it's saturated, and they say, well, it was polyunsaturated before we saturated it. Can you see it's this, again, trick in wording? Remember last night we looked at the lies and the deception that can come through, and they'll say, well, it's not really a lie. Well, it's either black or it's white. And so let's say that someone's having the orange juice. Sugar breaks down to fructose and glucose. This is refined sugar. And of course there's quite a bit of fructose in the orange juice. So we're already getting a little bit of an overload of fructose there. Whereas if the person ate the orange, that's the fructose and the glucose are in quite a balanced amount, and the liver can quickly convert that little bit of fructose to glucose. But let's go back to having a glass of orange juice, then they have a croissant, and the croissant's been sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. And they have a cup of coffee and they put sugar in that, more fructose and glucose, and they might have a slice of bread and the bread's been sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, and they have a sweet jam and the jam's got the fructose being the fruit and the sugar in it, which is more fruit. Can you see what's going on here? We're getting an overload of fructose. So instead of a little bit of fructose coming to the liver, a huge amount of fructose is coming to the liver, and the liver cannot convert it all to glucose. So then it just stores it on the liver as fat. There's your fatty liver. We're finding fatty liver in people today who don't drink alcohol. But you'll find when you look at the diet, it's a high carbohydrate diet. And people think, well, fruit juice, it's healthy. Well, unfortunately, a lot of it isn't, because a lot of it does have the sugar in it. And how many oranges does it take to get a glass of orange juice? It's actually quite an overload. That's why the best water to drink, the fluid that God gave to man to drink, is water. How clean would your body be if you washed it in fruit juice? How clean would your clothes be? So you do that analogy. So that's your fatty liver. How can you recover from fatty liver? It's very easy. Remember the sustain me principle? A is abstain. Stop the foods that are sweetened with the high fructose corn syrup. And you see, people look at the label and say, high fructose, oh, sounds like fruit. Corn, oh, corn's good. Can you see that wording? The person almost thinks it's good. It's like monosodium glutamate, called natural flavour enhancer. People read it and said, oh, natural, well, that's good. Flavour, oh, yeah, we like flavour. Can you see the wording? Often the wording, there's little tricks in those wording. Because if you just say chemicals have sweetened this, oh, we're not going to touch that. So it's that trick in wording. So that's your fatty liver. To recover from fatty liver, get the carbohydrate levels right down, eliminate anything that's sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. Start drinking water, stop drinking fruit juice. And within a couple of weeks, fatty liver can be resolved. So a lady said to me, I was diagnosed with fatty liver 10 years ago. I said, oh, you probably don't have it now. Because it can resolve very quickly. As soon as you give the body the right conditions, it immediately starts to put processes in place to bring back the balance. So that's your fatty liver. Let's go back to having a look at what happens with the food we eat. So the food we eat breaks down to glucose. And the first place the glucose, of course, first goes to the liver. And then it's the liver that sends it down the energy cycle. So number one, it's sent to the cell to be burnt as fuel. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got a lot of glucose left. And so now it's stored. It's stored and it looks like a little bunch of grapes. But it's sort of like that, but they're little molecules of glucose. And they're called glycogen. Glycogen is a name given to quick-release glucose stores. And we're going to look at that in more detail tomorrow. I think tomorrow we're looking at diabetes. So that's why you don't have to eat before you exercise. Because if you start running out of fuel, you've got little molecules of glucose sitting in your muscle cells just waiting to be plucked. And it's almost like they're in a prison. They can only be used by the muscle cell. But the liver also stores some glycogen. It can only store so much. And the glycogen that is stored in the liver, that can be sent all over the body. So that's a good backup for brain. It's like when you're exercising and you're running out of fuel, your glycogen stores are released. What about the brain? Well, you've got them in the liver. You've just got to make sure you drink water before you go on your morning walk, because you need that water to be able to release our stores. It's an amazing process. And tomorrow you'll see what an important part of managing diabetes this is. But today we're just looking at the liver and how it deals with this. On a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over. It's almost, overload of glucose. And so now the liver stores it in the most amazing fuel depot in the human body, which is fat. Looking at that, can you see that fat doesn't make you fat? And we'll be looking at that in detail when, I think it's tomorrow, we also look at weight loss in the evening. I've just given the basic science there. So that's what the liver does with the fuel that we eat. Carbohydrates are not bad. My husband would never forgive me if the potatoes stopped. It's really only when they're overdone and refined. And I don't think anyone ever chose to eat this way. It just happened because people are so busy today. One lady said to me, "Barbara, you don't understand, I don't cook." I said, "Oh." I felt like saying, "Do you eat?" But I know what she means. She's just so busy. I had my children in the kitchen at the age of about 8. In fact, all my children can cook. And my sons, their friends, we call them their mates, they call them the chefs, because it's so unusual that a man can cook. I think I told you my husband is very good at cooking toast. You know, he was never in the kitchen, he never even learned how to cook. He's still not very interested in cooking, and I don't mind at all because I like cooking. You can be incredibly creative. It's fun. People say, "Barbara, you're such a good cook," and I said, "Yeah, that's because I like food. And I love to make it taste nice." So the carbohydrates aren't bad. We're going to probably look at them in more detail tomorrow, but I wanted to just touch on this to show you that the liver, as the project manager, is the one that is orchestrating what happens with everything that comes into our body. Food, yes, and environmental poisons. Most environmental poisons are in a fat-soluble state. And they're stored in the fat when they're nasty. So we'll just call it FST, that's the fat-soluble toxin, stored in the fat cells. One of the most effective ways to detoxify our body is to stop eating. And the reason for this is that a huge amount of energy is required to digest a meal. About 1,200 calories is required to digest a meal. So when you stop eating, all those calories are now looking for something to do. And what they do is they look around at the body and they go to the place in the body that needs the most help. It can be likened to what happened, I'll tell you what happens to me. If I'm on holidays at home, I go to the place that's been bugging me. Every day I sweep the floor and wash the dishes and make the bed and wash the clothes. You know, you've got your maintenance, but over in the corner there's a pile of papers that's piling up. And I'm thinking I'll get to that. But it's not a priority. And then when I'm on holidays I go, in fact last holidays I think I pulled my whole bookcase apart because I love reading. And sometimes you read a book and it's fantastic and some it's just okay. So the okay's got given away. That's what your body does when you fast. It's got this extra energy. But before it can cause any regeneration or restoration, it's got to clean the house. And so when I pulled all the books out of the bookcase, before I put the books back, what do? I clean my bookcase because a bit of dust gets built up. I might even be brave enough to pull the bookcase out and look behind it. That's what your body's doing when you're fasting. But before it can do any restoration or regeneration, it's got a clean house. And that's why a detox is often called a cleanse. You've probably heard it called that. So that's one reason why it's called a cleanse. The other reason is that even when you're having juices, you're not really getting enough fuel to run on. And so the body starts breaking down the fat stores. Because remember what that fat is. It's stored glucose. So when you're on a fast, it starts to break down the fat stores to release the glucose that the cells need for fuel. But something else a little more sinister is also being released, and that's the fat-soluble toxins. And that's why the Vietnam veteran's doctor said, don't lose weight. So when he came to our retreat, we did it in a very cautious way, and I'll show you what we did as we go through this. So at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, our guests come in on Sunday. We found it most beneficial to give them a delicious meal that seems to get them through Monday, Tuesday, where they're just on juices. So we give them a delicious meal. We serve our main meal always in the middle of the day, about 1:30. And then at night we give them a thin soup. This thin soup is a lot of vegetables cooked in a lot of water for about 4 hours. It's like the old-fashioned stock. Remember the fuel stove, and Grandma used to have the saucepan on the side, and she got the carrots out of the garden and put the carrot tops and the onion skins and all of those sorts of things, and because there's a lot of minerals in them. And then that's used as a stock for maybe her soup or her stews. So that's what we do. We make almost a stock. And we have 5 ingredients in that stock. We put a couple of potatoes in. We don't peel them. Of course, we wash them. We put a few carrots in, and if they're from the garden, we put the carrot tops in as well. We put onion in, and we don't peel them. The only time we peel them is if it looks a little bit nasty. I don't like a bit of black on those onions. Don't want any mould in there. So potatoes, carrots, onions, and celery. And we use a lot of celery out of our garden. Please never throw the leaves away on the celery plant. We use a lot of our celery leaves. And I don't know if you've ever grown celery, but it almost looks like Italian parsley. I don't know what they do to that celery you buy, but it's a bit scary what they must pump it full of to have those thick stems. Our celery can have thick stems, but not quite as big. I find different types of celery, the stem can be a little thicker. So we put the leaves in, and so there's your 4 ingredients, and the 5th one is stinging nettle. There's a huge amount of minerals in the stinging nettle. You'll notice it's a very dark green plant, and that dark green indicates high minerals. And the stinging nettle roots, they go deeper than most plants. So they're able to gather different minerals from different levels of the earth. And we let that cook down for maybe 4 hours with a lot of water, cover it very, very well. Then we strain it. Now, one of the reasons, there's a few reasons why we give this to our guests at 6:30 at night, is that it's very high in minerals. We also put the Celtic salt in, so it actually tastes very nice. And in the afternoon, our guests do a steam sauna. In our next lecture, I'll show you why that's important when we look at the organs of elimination. And when you have a big sweat, yes, you're throwing off waste, but you're also throwing off minerals. If you ever tasted your perspiration, it's very salty. And so this broth is designed to replace minerals lost in the big sweat. But we'll define that a bit more in our next lecture. But we give our guests 5 juices a day. So the 5 juices a day are served at 8, 10, 12, 2, and 4. And predominantly, we serve a juice that is 80% carrot, 10% celery, and 10% apple. This is called the vegetarian's milk because you could just about subsist on this. In fact, I met a lady who fed that to her baby instead of milk. The baby had a skin disease. The baby could not handle the mother's milk. The baby couldn't handle any milk. And the naturopath said, as a last resort, try this. And the baby prospered on that. Every juice is a little different. This is predominantly the 8 o'clock juice. Another juice, we might add a bit of beet. Another juice, we might do 40 carrot, 40 cucumber. Another juice, we might put a bit of celery in. Oh, we've got celery. Ginger. So we do some variations. And the guests have 5 juices a day. One juice, so let's look at Monday. So on the Monday juice, at the 8, 12, and 4 juice, we serve a green barley supplement. And the green barley supplement has vitamin C and vitamin B. And we usually serve it with a bit of water and a bit of lemon. And on Monday, the 10 and 2 drink, we call it a PP, a protein powder. So the protein that we use is a pea protein. You can get some nice hemp proteins. You can get some organic soy protein powders. In a minute, when we go through the different stages of the liver detox, you will understand why we do that. Tuesday is a little different. This is the second day of juicing. On Tuesday, the 8, 12 and 4 juice have protein. And on Tuesday, the 10 and 2 juice has the green barley with all of its bits and pieces. As I go through the different stages of the liver detox, you will see that we slightly adjust it because of the liver's needs at different stages of the detox. I hope I haven't totally confused you. But that's what we do, and will make a little bit more sense. With the protein drink, we put it in a little organic soy or almond milk and a little coconut cream, or coconut milk you call it. So with the juice, those 5 juices, we serve a 8-ounce juice. And with that, we serve, I'm just guessing, a 2-ounce either green barley or protein powder. So when on Monday, when they're having the green barley, because it's not that exciting, green barley, I say to them, have your greens first and then have your dessert, which is the nice juice. But everyone loves the protein because it's got almond milk, a little bit of coconut cream. We aim to nutritionally support the liver as it detoxifies us from environmental poisons. So Monday, Tuesday, this is what we serve our guests. And as I just mentioned, the 6:30 is what we call the broth. So Monday, Tuesday, our guests fast. Wednesday morning is when we serve the first solid food. And the first meal that we serve is 50% raw, 50% cooked. When a person has a very delicate gut, maybe irritable bowel, they do not go well on a lot of raw food. We serve buffet. We find someone with irritable bowel, grated carrot, no. Lettuce, often no. Tomato, often no. Avocado, often yes. So remember, you're the doctor. And what I say to guests is, they say, look, there's very little I can eat. So I say, what about this? What about this? What about this? Our mind and our stomach is very closely connected. You heard of the vagus nerve that connects it all? And I find that if I make a suggestion and the person says yes, you see their stomach and their mind are closely connected. And so when they like the sound of that's what we serve. Because you're the doctor. There's no absolutes here. What works for one does not work for the other. But we find predominantly most guests do well on this. One man said, and this man was, I'll give it to you in kilos. The man was 48 kilos, and I'm 48 kilos, so that's about 100 pounds. The lady was 38 kilos. So that gives you an idea of how thin they were. And they said, we can't fast. Please don't fast us. Now, we're not absolute rule at our health retreat. We make suggestions, and of course it's the person's choice. But most people come to us to have the fast. And I said to them, with all due respect, I think it's important that you have a fast because your poor old stomach has been so overloaded. Because they were so thin, they were eating huge amounts of this, overloading their stomach. And they overloaded their stomach so much that the stomach actually couldn't access the nutrients in those foods, so it was just about going straight through them. They were getting thinner and thinner and thinner. I said, your stomach needs a rest. But I said to them, to help your body not to lose any more weight, because I acknowledged they couldn't afford to lose any more weight, we gave them a protein drink every single juice, every juice. And they didn't lose weight. They were very happy. And they both had this huge scar on their stomach. Do you know what you see? You know what it means when you see a huge scar, maybe 1/2 inch wide? That has been opened several times. Because if there's been one cut, you might have a very fine line of a scar, but if it's been opened again and again and again. So they'd had major gut problems for a long time. So I said to them, I know you've come here for my advice, and my advice is your stomach needs a rest. And I said to them, if I give you protein every juice, I can't guarantee anything, but I'm pretty sure you won't lose weight. And even if you do lose a little, your stomach will now be working so well that you'll start to put on weight. So they agreed. I saw the man 2 years later, and I did not recognise him. He was 200 pound now, but it was muscle and he looked very good. He said, I just want to thank you for what you did, your advice. That stomach needed a break. So if someone's ever worried about losing weight on the fast, we just give them extra protein. So we had a lady do our program, loved it so much she came back with her husband, who was 45, and 3 sons, 18, I think 20, 22. And what do young boys those age want? Muscle. So they're a bit worried about the fast, so we not only gave them protein every juice, we gave them another protein drink 7:30 at night. They were happy and they did not lose weight. So you adjust. Some people say it's too much juice. I say it's fine, we'll give you 4 ounces. Some people say it's not enough juice. Oh, okay, we'll give you a little bit more. So you see you're adjusting. You're adjusting per person. So that's the Monday, Tuesday juicing program. I say to our guests, you could not eat in a day what we put in the juices. It's a huge amount of nourishment in those juices. But what we want to bypass is digestion. And we want to bypass digestion so that all that energy goes to cleaning house, goes to restoration, regeneration. So our guests have a meal Sunday. And so by the evening, when usually some solid food will come, the body starts realising there's no food coming. And so even Sunday night, the body can start breaking down those fat stores. That fat-soluble toxin that's stored in the fat stores, it cannot be released as a fat-soluble state. It has to be broken down to a water-soluble state. And so the liver does this in 3 phases. So phase 1 with some people is happening Sunday night, with some people it's happening Monday morning. In phase 1, the liver takes the fat-soluble toxin, because even though we supply a lot of juices, it's still not quite enough for the needs of the cell. And that's why the fat cells start getting broken down. So the fat-soluble toxins are once again released into the bloodstream. The fat-soluble toxins once again come to the liver. And the liver's about to say, not this guy again, wrap him up in fat and store him. And then the liver says, oh, actually, they're at the health retreat. They're getting the nutrients necessary to break this down to a water-soluble state. And so the liver now puts it through those phases. Phase 1, the liver takes this fat-soluble toxin and it breaks it down to a metabolite. A metabolite simply means the first stage of metabolism or breakdown. But this metabolite is nasty. Sometimes it's 100 times more toxic than it originally was, especially in the case of alcohol. sometimes it starts releasing a lot of free radicals. What are free radicals? Free radicals are atoms with an electron short. So with an atom, you need to have equal electrons on the outside that are spinning around to neutrons. But what happens is often environmental poisons will take that electron, so now we've got an unstable atom, and that unstable atom's looking for another electron, so it'll take it from another atom. Now there's a free radical, it'll take it, and then another free radical. You've probably heard of free radical damage. This metabolite is highly volatile. And you might look at this and comment and say, well, what's the liver doing? It's just created something worse than it originally was. It's a process. So when you're cleaning out the kitchen cupboards, the kitchen looks 100 times worse than when you started. When my son Peter put a new clutch in his car, the garage looked like a bomb had hit it. But of course, when the car was all put back together, everything's good. It's a process. And your liver has certain needs as it goes through this process. It needs antioxidants. And you've probably heard of antioxidants. And antioxidants are given the name free radical scavengers because antioxidants come along with lots of electrons. And remember that free radical is an electron short? And so the antioxidants have lots of electrons, so they come in and balance out and basically negate the free radicals. The most potent antioxidants are beta-carotene, and beta-carotene is found in your green and your orange-coloured vegetables. So every juice that we give our guests are either green or orange or red, high in antioxidants. Vitamin C is probably the most famous antioxidant. But vitamin C is not ascorbic acid. In fact, one writer, he explained it like this. Ascorbic acid is like receiving an envelope in the mail, but there's nothing in it. In nature, ascorbic acid is found with bioflavonoids. So if you buy vitamin C, make sure it's ascorbic acid with bioflavonoids. That's your whole C. In fact, in Australia, they did some testing of foods in, I think you have Costco. We don't have Costco, but we have Woolies. It's like a supermarket. And they tested the oranges, they tested all the fruits, they tested the vegetables, and they found that the food that was the highest in vitamin C in the supermarket was cabbage. And unfortunately, a lot of the oranges were quite low. For oranges to be high, they have to be picked early in the morning with a tree that has received peak nourishment because of the microbes in the soil. I know when my son William was landscaping, that was his first apprenticeship. And we put him into that apprenticeship at the age of 15. In Australia, you can go into apprenticeships quite early. And he used to do landscaping and maintenance on many gardens, and it was in a very wealthy area. And one day, this lady came out and said, "William, take those orange things off the lawn. They're messy." They were oranges. So William got all the oranges. They would have been very nice oranges. I wonder if that lady buys orange juice. And he said to me, "Oh, they're amazing oranges." So those oranges would have been high in vitamin C. In fact, of the fruits, they found that kiwi fruit was higher in vitamin C than even the oranges. Again, much depends on how they're grown, how early they're picked. Sometimes they're stored for a long time, sometimes they're gassed to slow down the ripening, so all of this happens, which is why in many cases, our foods today don't have the nutrients that our bodies need. The third most famous antioxidant is vitamin E, and vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin. So your fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E and K. And our guests are getting their vitamin E in their protein drink when we do it with almond milk and coconut milk. So there's vitamin E in there. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. So that's what the liver needs in phase 1. Take your mind back to the program that we give our guests on Monday. We give them 3 green barleys with vitamin C added, and all their juices are high in beta-carotene. So you see that we're nutritionally supporting the liver as it goes through phase 1. I'm going to put these 2 sideways because they're not antioxidants, but the liver still needs these at this stage. Minerals, and all of those juices are high in minerals, especially the green barley, and your B vitamins, which we add to the green barley drink. Within 36 hours of beginning a detox program, phase 2 kicks in. And in phase 2, the liver takes this highly toxic metabolite and it joins it together with amino acids. So the union of this highly toxic metabolite and the amino acids, it's like a joining together. Amino acids and the toxic metabolite, and this produces the water-soluble state. Now, do you remember what I said earlier? The liver cannot release out of the body the environmental poison in a fat-soluble state. It needs to be in a water-soluble state. So the 2 stages are the first breakdown and then the joining together of the amino acids with the toxic metabolite. This explains why we give 2 protein drinks on Monday, but on Tuesday, when our guests are going into phase 2, we serve 3 protein drinks. So we're supplying the amino acids, but we are bypassing digestion. Digestion takes maybe 10 minutes. It's very, very brief. And the pea protein that we buy has had enzymic effect on it so that it's pre-digested. One guest said, "Who digested it?" It's like milk being converted to yogurt. It's a pre-digested. The sourdough bread, that culturing process breaks down. So those enzymes can break the food down, so it's basically in a pre-digested state. Because we want to bypass digestion. Because we want the body to go into a cleaning with detoxification. Phase 3 happens in conjunction with phase 2. In phase 3, the liver takes the water-soluble state and it releases it out via your sweat glands. It releases it out via your colon. And it releases it out via your kidneys in the urine. And after the break, we're going to go into detail those organs and how they release out the waste. It's one thing to break down these environmental poisons to a water-soluble state, but the next stage is just as important, which is giving the organs of elimination the right conditions so that it can be eliminated efficiently and effectively. This information has only been known since the early 2000s, and it explains so much, but it also shows why it is unwise and unsafe to do a water fast. Because especially if someone has environmental poisons, quite a few stored up in their fat cells, and we find it in the farmer who's been using a lot of chemicals. We find it in the hairdresser who's been using a lot of chemicals. We find it in the cleaner who's been cleaning with a lot of chemicals. We even find it with some housewives who who are using chemicals in their home. We had a pest control guy do our program, and I said to him, is it true that women can buy in the supermarket chemicals that you're not even allowed to use? He said, that's right. So we've got to go to the white vinegars, we've got to go over to the sodium bicarbonate. It's so cheap. But if you want it to smell nice, you can just put some eucalyptus oil or some lavender oil or some very nice essential oils that'll give a nice scent. In fact, the two little girls that were in the house I stayed with last week, we went on walks and there were lavender plants, and I said, this is what you do to get a nice scent in your hair, and I got my hair down and I rubbed it amongst all the lavender. Oh, and the little girls were putting their hair down. You can smell beautiful lavender on our hair. I said to them, no need for perfume, girls. All we need to do is find the lavender plants. And it is a nice thing to grow, and you can cut the lavender and just put it on little plates in the bathroom. It gives a lovely scent. So this need not be expensive. The natural cleaning products are very cheap. So this information on the 3 phases of the liver detox shows why many fasting experts today are saying just 2 days. Just 2 days. Because if you go a 3rd day and you've got quite a lot of fat-soluble toxins built up, too much can be released. And especially if you're having juices, that'll produce a lot of metabolites. And how many people, when they fast, take protein? Because the needs for phase 1 are the antioxidants, but the needs for phase 2 are protein. Because those amino acids are needed to mop up those toxic metabolites. So the man who was the Vietnam veteran, he did our 2-day juice fast, but we gave him protein every juice. 8, 10, 12, 2 and 4. And he did lose weight. He was very happy to lose a bit of weight. But we did it safely because we provided what the liver needed to be able to mop up these toxic metabolites. Yes, we want this out of our body, but if all the environmental poisons that are in our body were to come out right now, we'd all be dead. It'd kill us. And so the body is very wise. There is an intelligence in the body that God put it there. And that intelligence on how to deal with these environmental poisons, on how to let them go in a safe way, the body will do that when it's given the right conditions. And so little by little by little, it will let them go. One lady said to me, when she started living right, when she started giving her body the conditions that it needs for healing, she said she would go to the bathroom and she said it smelt like chemicals. She didn't worry because you know what she thought? I'm glad it's out. She said she experienced that for 3 years before the chemical smell got less and less. You see what the body does? It just lets it out little by little by little. I gave this lecture a few years ago at a seminar in Minneapolis, and a man who was a scientist came up to me and he said, "This is very interesting." He said, "But this is not for your lay people, this is for your academics." I said, "Lay people have livers too, you know." I believe that this is vital information, and it also supports what we looked at yesterday or last night at the 3 essential food groups. Do you remember the 3 essential food groups? It confirms why they're essential. Fibre is an essential food group, and fibre is found mostly in your vegetables and your fruits. There's where all your antioxidants are found. Protein We need more protein today than any generation that ever lived on the planet, because we are dealing with more fat-soluble toxins than any generation that ever lived on the planet. If you went to a shop 100 years ago, the fabric was made out of cotton, is that right? Or wool. But you look in most shops today, and you'll need a magnifying glass half the time, and it's nearly all made out of chemical fabrics. So in the next lecture, when we look at skin, I'll show you the effect of this. So we are exposed to more environmental poisons than ever, and we need more protein. Can you see why? Because we need the amino acids to mop up those toxic metabolites. I thank God that He's given us a liver that in 2023 we can detoxify effectively and safely from those environmental poisons. And the best proteins are found in your plant proteins. Your plant proteins, it's very clean burning fuel in your plant proteins. You've just got to make sure you soak or pressure cook or slow cook and rinse very, very well those legumes and have some nuts and seeds every meal. My suggestion is have legumes every day, I do, and have nuts and seeds every meal. And fat. And the best fats are found in your nuts, your seeds, your avocados, and also a little bit through your olive oil and coconut oil. So these three essential food groups help the liver. They nutritionally support the liver to be able to effectively detoxify us from these fat-soluble toxins and to deal with these metabolites which are part of the first breakdown. Can you imagine if a person has lots of juices but doesn't supply the amino acids, they can be sicker after their fast or their detox than before. So we need that protein. And on this high carbohydrate diet that many are having, often they're deficient in fibre, protein and fat. They're overdoing the non-essential and missing out on the three essentials. Another reason why people are sick. And again, in every case, it can be slightly different. So what does phase 3 need? Phase 3 of the liver detox needs fat. Why fat? Because it keeps the cells supple. 50% of the membrane around every cell is fat. How do we supply the fat? In the protein drink. We put a little almond milk and a little coconut milk. So the body, the liver specifically, is being nutritionally supported. If a person goes on a detox and they only do water, some people can get away with it if they don't have a lot of fat-soluble toxins built up in their body. That's about the only way they can get away with it. But if a person goes on a water fast for a couple of days, and there's quite a few fat-soluble toxins built up, and they don't supply the amino acids, the liver starts to break down to supply the amino acids. So within 48 hours of starting a detox program, they can suffer 25% liver function loss. Eeh. The good news is that the liver is a recoverable organ. That's why they can do a liver transplant with just a small piece of liver. So that's the good news. And by looking at this, you can see why God made it that way. And cancer cannot get a hold on the body if the liver is working in peak performance. So before we have a break, just let me go over a few liver herbs. You've heard the old saying, sweet to the mouth, bitter to the stomach. This is sweet to the mouth, bitter to the liver. Bitter to the mouth, sweet to the liver. So here are your bitter liver herbs. Dandelion, dandelion as a flower, as a leaf, as a root. St Mary's thistle, I think you call it milk thistle. Very bitter herb. There's another bitter herb called gentian. It's a root, you'd buy that as a root. And the milk thistle, that's usually the seed. And there's a sweet bitter called ginger. And there's another sweet bitter called the humble lemon. Lemon is acid where it should be. Where's that, students?
Stomach.
And alkaline where it should be, which is in the tissues. These three are such bitter herbs that a lot of people find it easy to take it as a supplement in a capsule or tablet. And if anyone has any liver problems, the liver herbs are important because those herbs can revive and restore the liver. That's the good news. Anyone that's had hepatitis or has hepatitis, they should go on the liver herbs. And at the same time, to help the liver greatly reduce their exposure to environmental poisons, because it's the liver that suffers. The more chemicals that come in, the more load it puts on the liver.